I am looking out my office window, and the sun was out. And when I in my studio, I got done. I had a great prayer session this morning, and I look out. I think, well, the world's not so bad, right? And then we get all this noise, and we know that there's an attack on the human heart. In spite of all the craziness going on, we're finding you, young men, who are getting their hearts back, or at least sensing something's wrong, and they're looking to get my heart back. What is this crazy life all about, huh? You've grown up in probably the most toxic culture in human history, and we've gone over all that stuff. So where is our hope? Our hope is in Militus Christi, as being soldiers of Christ, in Jesus Christ himself, who actually, it's a win-win situation, because not only do you get your heart back, do you find peace, do you find some fulfillment in your heart that is solid. You got a solid foundation underneath you, and then we go out and try to make the world a better place. It's a win-win situation, because at the same time we're winning the battle for eternal life. This is just a temporal world, but we've unpacked so much of that. I just want to touch base with you on a couple crazy things that are going on, in case you're not aware of them. In Colorado, they're just trying to ram through an abortion bill, and HB 25-1312, the most extreme assault on parental rights and religious freedoms we've ever seen. It's a war on families that's going on. And so in that bill, they define misgendering as child abuse. Parents could lose custody of their kids for using the wrong pronouns. This is going into law. Well, it's not passed yet, but this is what's they're bringing forth today. Shields parents who traffic children into Colorado for irreversible gender surgery. So if they're open, this is an open state. So if you can't get your child operated on, or get them puberty blockers because that your little girl thinks she's a boy, and get her breasts cut off, we'll do it here in Colorado. Forces every school, including charter schools, to adopt radical gender transition policies, redefines misgendering and dead naming as discrimination, forcing every Colorado business to bow before this ideology or face lawsuits. You can't make this up. In this day where you look at something like a little boy or a little girl, so confused, and the parents themselves that try to protect those kids from these ideologies are being under attack. It's amazing. And not to be outdone, here in Illinois, our governor thinks he's a hero for of the people. It's insanity. So he wants to make Illinois the baby killing capital of the world. You can kill them up to the time of they're ready to be born. And if that child didn't die in an abortion attempt, we can just leave that child outside to die on its own. And if the governor said, if they actually escape the womb, he said this. He goes, we expanded Medicare to cover gender affirming surgeries. We brought LBGTQIA plus curriculum into our schools so that all students can learn about the contributions of queer and trans trailblazers. I mean, we're rewriting history now. There's no more heroes anymore. The real heroes now, in this new defined way to look at the world, are the contribution of queer and trans trailblazers. He said the State Board of Education is implementing gender inclusive policies to ensure that our schools are welcoming and affirming. And I'm proud to say that my administration is the most diverse administration in state history. What does it mean to be diverse? That means there's no moral values anymore. We're all diverse. Everything's okay. Well, something doesn't sit well in the human heart when that's going on. At the same time, I'm going to bring up a couple other crazy things that you may or may not be aware of. The European countries are getting ready to fall. We see this in Great Britain. We see this even the government of Sweden. The prime minister said a couple weeks ago there that he's lost control of the monopoly on violence that's going on in Sweden. And I think in many ways the rest of Europe's right behind them. We've allowed all of these influx of radical Muslims and all kinds of things. What happens at the end? The morality just breaks down. Bishop Sheen said that of the 22 major civilizations out throughout history, 19 of them have fallen from inside, right, from within, the moral rot within. We start to see that with the Biden administration here in the United States. So Trump again gives us a little window. It's chaotic out there. It's going to continue to be chaotic because this is the great force. Sister Lucia of Fatima died not too long ago, 2005. So this is the decisive battle that we're in, the definitive battle between our Lord and Satan, and it's over marriage and the family. This battle includes all of us, and this marriage and the family. The focus of that attack is on children today. If they escape the womb, we're rendering them sterile. But you're seeing the whole of Western civilization unravel. Here in the United States, we have a little window. Um, it's a great time to be an American right now, but we all got to stand up. We're seeing, excuse me, we're seeing protests break out all over the country this last couple of weekends, protesting Elon Musk and Doge, a Department of Governmental Efficiency. And why? Because we're cutting waste and corruption and spending and stuff out of there. And the deep state doesn't want anything to do with that. They're about power and money. And so, anyways, we go on, and what happens? It creates a restlessness in our own hearts, right? And in that restlessness, where do we find peace? Where do we find our hope? Where do we look around and say, no, no, there's got to be something more? The good thing about this is that you're waking up. So we got the Claymore battle plan. Always, I remind you, if you didn't already, download this from our website. Go into resources at the jp2renew.org. Everything's in the show notes. Go to resources, download the Claymore battle plan. In that battle plan, it says there's an enemy that seeks to destroy humanity. And this is how it gets back to you now. Satan doesn't have his own clay. He can only attack and destroy and distort what God has created good, which is the human person, body and a soul. Body and a soul without this grace, without this power of Jesus Christ, is sin and death. And you just see this all around us. This is what's coming in to Europe, attacking these children, marriages, and the families, putting on, bringing this into the schools, like Pritzker just said. And so, what's happening? And here's my main point today. First, he's going to attack the individual human person. And this is right out of the battle plan. This is page 3. For he or she was created in the image of God, in love, by love, and for love. For truth and love. This is where the battle between good and evil always begins. The evil one that targets the child in the womb. Next up, he's going to attack the individual human heart. If you escape the womb alive, he wants to isolate and separate us from God. And we live like cut flowers, right? We're disconnected from the source of life and love. So what do you do? How do you do that? Well, you got to restore your own heart first. You can't do anything. You can't give anything. You can't be anything to anybody until you're filled with divine life and love. So the first aspect, this is page 4, to Claymore Militus Christi, is to get your own heart back. And this is part of spiritual formation, the first thing that we have to do. With that all said, I brought a special guest on for today's episode. Father Wayne Sattler is going to be coming on. He wrote a book, Remain in Me and I in You. Before I bring Father Wayne on, I just want to thank our sponsor for today's show, AIM Utility Advisors, who are owned and operated by the Lally family, who are local Catholic friends of ours and supporters of our work. With all of this craziness going on in the world, is your business prepared for the increased energy prices that are going to start in June of 2025? AIM Utility Advisors is a family-owned energy brokerage and consultancy company that has been helping small and medium businesses reduce their energy costs for over 30 years. AIM will put together a straightforward savings plan tailored to your business needs. AIM operates without a quota, so you're going to request a no-pressure analysis for free through their website, which is aimenergygroup.com. That's AIM, A-I-M, energygroup.com. See the show notes from my friend TJ Lally's direct number. Give him a call. See what kind of energy prices you can lock in. I am very excited and grateful to have Father Wayne Sattler on with me. Father, how are you? Good to be with you.
Very good. A pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation to be with you today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So you're in the Diocese of Bismarck. You've been a priest since 1997. Today you serve as the diocesan spiritual director for the Bismarck Diocese. In between all of that, Father, you lived the life of a diocesan hermit for 6 years. So we have to hear a little bit about that. Father recently wrote a book that speaks to the work that we're doing here at the John Paul II Renewal Center. So I'm very excited about to unpack this book, especially for the young people we're meeting and the young men that we're meeting who are sensing, Father, in the midst of this toxic culture. I don't think in history you can probably grow up in such a toxic culture. And in spite of that, it shows the power of the human heart. In spite of that, these young men that we're meeting, uh, 18, 19, even high school, but 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, they're saying something's wrong. They don't always know exactly what it is. They start to vote a little differently this time. Not even quite sure why. They just sense something's wrong. So this is a great opportunity to disciple them, and that's what we're doing through a apostolate that our long-term listeners know called Claymore, Militus Christi. Anyways, we're always looking for a reference, Father, for something to help these young men in spiritual formation and doctrinal formation, right? But here's what you do. Here's what you do, and this is what's got me excited. The book is called Remain in Me and I in You, relating to God as a person, not as an idea. Of course, I'll make sure I get this in the show notes. But I just told Father before we came in, I'm going to buy a box of these, maybe multiple boxes, and I'm going to get them out to some of the young people that we're meeting. So, Father, so thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at right now. Mention, talk a little bit about what a diocesan hermit is, and what got you there, and then the reason that you wrote this book. What was the impetus behind all that?
Yeah, I think no matter what age we might be raised in, there is this conflict of the soul
Mm-hmm.
that tries to find fulfillment in what this age has to offer, and what we're told might make us happy doesn't always make us happy. And to be honest with you, in my own journey, I was engaged to be married
Mm-hmm.
and was preparing to take my LSATs a second time to get into a little bit better law school. And the closer I got to these goals that I thought were going to fulfill me, the more I realized that they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath that was just now, if it was my calling to do that, that's great. And God would have fulfilled me as a married man and as a lawyer. But he, every time I would listen to him in prayer, there was this door being opened to the priesthood that I really wasn't interested in. I was much more interested in getting married and having a family and living out a
Oh.
career as a lawyer. But the closer I got to those goals, the more I realized that they weren't going to fulfill me in the same way that the Lord can. And that's the hunger that this book is trying to address. That when we really encounter the Lord for who he is, as St. Augustine would remind us, nothing else will satisfy us. And that's true for a priest and it's true for a layman. That I often joke with married couples. I say, getting married is about finding the love of your life, but the love of your life is not your spouse, it's Christ. And if you love him
Yes.
effectively, you will be a good spouse to your wife or husband because you'll be able to bring his love to them. And for the priest, then the Lord is calling him in a specific way to join himself more deeply to that love, to bring him to more souls as well, to more people. And for myself, I really wasn't versed so much in prayer. And as I got into the seminary, my spiritual director kind of recognized,
How old were you, Father,
oh,
when
a
you
good
went to the
question.
seminary?
So actually, I went, short story or a long story short, but out of high school, I had a great scholarship to a state school, and I went there first. And then after a year there, I actually went to the seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. And a year after that, I dropped out, convinced
Mm.
that I was not called to be a priest. And then that's when I got married and engaged, and then graduated from college there. And I was 23 years old.
Now you said I got married and got engaged, but you got
Oh,
engaged to get married, right?
engaged to get married.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
yes,
sorry. Yeah.
yes,
Good
yes,
catch.
yes,
I did not get married, no.
yes.
So then the second time that I went to the seminary, I was 23 years old at that time.
Mm.
And um, the more that I gave myself to the Lord in prayer, the more I received. And my spiritual director started to recognize that the Lord has been very generous in that time of prayer too, of drawing me into contemplation and kind of skipping over meditation. I kind of found it hard to meditate.
Mm.
And that's when he started recommending that I discern the possibility of a contemplative vocation. And so in the breaks during school, I went to school over in Rome. Actually, was blessed to meet St. John Paul II a number
Oh,
of
you
times while
were?
I was, yeah,
Beautiful. What
very
a
beautiful,
gift. What a gift.
beautiful gift, beautiful.
Yeah. I miss him, I miss
I do too. Yeah, as you said, today is the anniversary of his passing,
20,
and
as we're speaking, yes, it's 20 years since he passed in 2005. So amazing. Father, he wrote this. In fact, I just wrote an article for the Catholic Exchange, and I don't know if they published it or not yet. But anyways, I wrote in there a meditation or a homily. He was, for the next day, which would have been Divine Mercy Sunday, and he wrote a meditation on divine mercy, which he loved so much. He passed away the day before on April 2nd. This was on April 3rd. Divine Mercy Sunday would have been on April 3rd. On April 2nd, he passes away, but it was read, and I have that. It was just it's beautiful, Father. His heart is beautiful, and but I sense something of him in your heart. That kind of depth, that he would bring out then into the world, and that's, I think, kind of where you're going with this contemplation, right? This look at John Paul was something of a mystic, wasn't he? And you in order to experience what you're talking about, that is kind of a mystical experience, isn't it, Father? And it's not exclusive to just a few people. I mean, at least the openness to this is something we should all be at least open to, and walking in that journey and saying, I'm going to be touched by God. He can speak to me. He can speak to me.
yeah, there's a beautiful biography on John Paul II that recognizes that he's not a man that can be understood by the outside.
Mm.
It's through his interior life with the Lord. And it's the impact of that relationship with not an idea in our head, but with the living Lord, that changes the perspective of our whole life. And we see that very clearly in John Paul II, and I saw it very clearly in my own life.
Mm.
And that's the perspective that I'm uh, awaken this awareness of trying to bring this to others in this book. A lot of it revolves around this encounter with a sister during a retreat, and she was preparing to make her final vows, and she was, had been a convert to the faith prior to conversion. She had a position of real prominence in the world, just a beautiful soul, and she was just one step away from making her final vows. But she was questioning in her heart
Mm.
whether to do it or not. And she confided to me that, the summer before that she found herself drawn to this priest, that nothing physical had unfolded, but she kind of joked to me. She said, Father, he wasn't even that great. She said,
Mm.
what happens when Mr. Wonderful enters the room?
Mm.
And I said, Sister, if Mr. Wonderful hasn't entered the room, we have a problem.
Oh.
And then it struck me that I should probably clarify that I wasn't talking about myself. Mr. Wonderful has entered the room. Can't you see that? And that was when my heart was open for this question to be asked for the first time. And I looked at her and said, Sister, is God a person to you or an idea?
Mm.
Because he's a marvelous idea. And she was a very highly intellectual woman who had been engaged more by the idea of God and by the idea of Christ than by the person.
Mm.
And after a long, uncomfortable silence, she raised her head and with a very sad look, replied, "Yeah, he seems to be more of an idea right now, Father."
Yeah. So, Father, here's the question. And how do we go from that idea? Here's these young people again that we're talking about. And this could be any age, right? I mean, look at I have a brother that's 11 months younger than me. That through the death of his wife only a couple of years ago, through cancer, he was always a spiritual guy, you know, and he loved the idea again, right, of God, and but to be touched deeply, and it was in this passing, right, in this passing of his wife with cancer. He had quit his job. He was taking care of her, bathing her, etc. And on her deathbed, she was very anxious. She's very anxious. And I said, Bobby, my brother, I want to ask our parish priest. He's so wonderful. You know, deep heart. I want him to come over and speak to. They were cradle Catholics. You know, had walked away from the church like so many of us. And anyways, at first she didn't want to have a priest come over because she thought that was giving up. Then I'm passing
Mm.
away now. Now I'm going to die if this happens, right? And we explained to her that no, this is a sacrament for the sick. Now, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, the you're, you know, just for death. But anyways, here I'm going to make this quick, but it just reminds me. So Father comes in. They let Father come in. She's very anxious, very nervous, and my brother leaves the room for just a little while. Comes back in around. Father calls him back in around 20 minutes later. She has a confession, receives the Eucharist, and he walks in and he said, "Jack, the peace, the peace. She was there, right? She was present, but peace." He said, "Jack, I knew something happened." And so, Father, this changed his heart. It was
Mm.
amazing. He would never miss mass now. I mean, the confession, the mass, the sacrament. Anyways, the difference is I'm just saying he encountered the person. He encountered the person. He experienced this, Father. He's in his 60s, you know. So what my point is, it can go across the age group. But when I'm speaking to these young people, they're really confused, Father. And so when you say what you're saying now, that there's a possibility for them to encounter not just Google information about God, but to counter them, this is very exciting. And this is what your book is about, Father.
Yeah. I guess, for me personally, just the more that I encountered this person, and just to be clear, we never stop falling into the trap of treating God as an idea, no matter how advanced we get in our spiritual life. It it's something we have to be drawn back to again and again and again of encountering the real person. And I guess for myself, when I started to really encounter him, I knew my life needed to revolve around that person because he is the Mr. Wonderful who has entered the room. I use the story of the rich young man, too,
Yes.
and how Christ, encounters him and observes from him that you're lacking in one thing. And it's like the craziest statement to make for anybody to come up to you and say, "Hey, you're lacking in one thing," and refer to yourself. I mean, who can say that? Only
Yeah.
God can say that.
Yes.
And for me, it was that awareness that he is the one thing that I'm lacking. And the more that I gave myself to him, the more I received. And that's what kind of led eventually to this, discernment of a life as a hermit, to avail myself to him as much as I possibly can, in this world. Um,
Uh, Father,
and
I'm going to I'm going to have you get into this book, but just give us and I don't want to take too much time
yeah,
because we're going to run out of time. But this what does it mean to be a diocesan hermit? People are going to be asking me this afterwards, and if you don't answer just at least briefly, I'm going to get emails and texts on this, and I'm going to say, "Oh, I got to get back to Father." So what is that exactly? It's not just a hermit. it's a diocesan hermit. Is there a difference, and what does that mean? And can you do that in a minute or two, or would that take too long, Father?
I'll try to do it in a minute for you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
most hermits are connected to a religious community, or it's a community of hermits. So like the Carmelites are hermits,
Mm.
some of them. The Carthusians are certainly hermits, and it's a community of men living together, trying to live a life of prayer and penance, first for their own soul to live in union with God, because there's nothing more beautiful on this earth, than a soul that's in union with Him. And then for the Lord to use that in any way that He wants to for the good of the church
Mm.
and the world. So in the new Code of Canon Law, 1987, they reinserted a code for a diocesan hermit.
Mm.
And a diocesan hermit is not part of a religious community. They make their vows to the diocesan bishop. And so it can be a layperson could do
Mm.
this, and there are a number of lay hermits out there who I'm aware of, and it could be a religious too, and it could be living out as I did in the middle of nowhere in an abandoned farmstead, um, or it could be in the heart of the city,
Mm.
too. And it's not about the location so much; it's about the way of life that they would follow. And as a hermit, you would write a rule of life. You'd go through a period of discernment, as I did with my bishop, whether this was really God calling us to do it or not. And then you would make your promises to him, and he would be your superior then, the diocesan bishop
Gotcha.
would. So
I
that's what
gotcha.
rather
Okay.
than we hear of a diocesan priest or a religious priest, and it doesn't mean that a diocesan priest isn't religious. It means that he's not part of a religious community like the Carmelites or
Right.
Francis,
Right.
but
But
that
you're
he is
not.
part of a
You're at that
diocese.
point, Father. You're living alone,
Yeah.
and you're not connected to a specific parish as a parish priest anymore. You've kind of dislocated or moved away at least for a period of time to be alone, right, with
Yeah.
God. Okay,
Yeah.
I hope that answers everybody's question. Now, the book is split up into three parts, right?
Hmm.
Knowing God, loving God, serving God. What you say here in this first part, knowing God. In my 6 years as a hermit, I came to appreciate the difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is the conscious choice to be alone with God. Isolation is just being left alone. This is very important, I think, especially if I see this through a little bit of a turn on the lens of so many young people I meet that are lonely, Father. And I want you to speak to that. Solitude is the conscious choice to be alone with God. Isolation is being left alone. And I really would like to tie this in a little bit. You can feel lonely, and to open yourself up to what's called John Paul would call it original solitude, actually, in the garden before even evil came in. And it's a very powerful time, and we all need to spend that time, Father, with God. Irregardless of what your vocation is, what your journey is going to be, this is important time, isn't it, Father?
Very much so. Yeah. One of the quotes that I really love in the book is of Mother Teresa, and she
Mm,
would ask her own sisters, "Do you really know the living Jesus?
mm,
Not through books, but by being alone with him in your heart." And that's solitude, the conscious choice to be alone with God. And there's the beautiful quote, it's accredited to different people because it's such an ancient and well-grained quote that the man who has God with him is never less alone than when he is alone.
mm,
And that's very true.
mm.
But then there is also, we also use we also isolate people as the deepest form of punishment. That
Yes.
if you're alone and you don't have God with you, it's the worst possible place to be. So we use solitary confinement. Put a guy in a cell long enough, and he's going to drive himself crazy if it's just by himself. And even as youth, that's how we're punished too, right? I mean, we're sent
Go
up
to
to
your
our
room.
room.
Go to your room.
When you're ready, you can come back down. And
Yeah,
unless you
yeah,
have a
yeah.
little contemplative soul, that they're going to say, "Great, I got to go up to my room and just be alone with God."
Yes, yes.
Um,
Because you think of solitude, but we're people, we're relational. We're created relational. The Trinity is relational. So John Paul speaks about this, and I see this coming out of your book, Father, that when I'm in solitude, these young people are realizing something, that we're different, right, than the rest of creation. We're created with reason and free will, right? We're seeking the truth. That's what these young people are seeking. Like, what is the truth? Something's wrong here. So instead of feeling lonely at that point, Father, I want to, talk, to them, and through your book and through the work that we're doing here, is just trying to make this connection so that they open their hearts, like you said, to the possibility that God will speak to them, and he's not a vending machine. So we have to be careful here. Hey, we don't put in a prayer and out comes God into our hearts, but he will touch you. And the last thing I'll just say, Father, is our great desire. You mentioned this, our desire of our hearts, like Saint Augustine would say, this desire is for something more. And that something more is this. So this solitude, Father, how do we get into the solitude? So if I'm a young guy listening to you right now, and I go, yeah, instead of feeling lonely right now, what should I do? How would I open my heart? Maybe, I'm dropping on my knees and I say, there's got to be something more. How would I do that, Father, if I haven't done that before? How would I open my heart up and invite God in to try to open myself up, right? To say, God, if you're there, speak to me.
Yeah, first of all, to realize that this isn't all on our shoulders, that I don't have to manifest anything here. God is his own, that's the beauty of this. God really is his own person. And he's wanting a relationship with us way more than we are.
Oh,
But it takes
yes,
two,
yes.
just like any natural relationship. And in the book, I kind of go through that. I walk a person through a natural relationship, that initial attraction to the other. But then you have to get to know their name, and you have to talk to them, which is vocal prayer. And then eventually you might write things to them, or think about past conversations, which is kind of meditation.
Mhm.
But then to really engage the person, then not just with the mind, but with the heart. And when we're talking about that with God, you already referred to it. It's this peace that
Mhm.
the world cannot give.
Mhm.
And I think one of the places that we first really learn that peace is in the sacrament of reconciliation. So, in the sacrament of reconciliation, the priest, as part of the formula of absolution, will say, "May God give you pardon and peace." And every single time, if you're aware of it, you leave that confessional with a peace that you did not go in there with. And
I
I'll
can
always
attest to
ask
that, Father.
people, yeah, I always ask people that now when you go back to your pew, I want you to recognize that peace in your heart because it's
Mhm.
real and you didn't fabricate it. It's really Christ. And if you really attune yourself, when you go to Holy Communion in a state of grace,
Mhm.
you'll go back to your pew with that same peace. Like you might have fought to get to Mass, and make time to get to Mass, but nobody is lacking of that peace when they leave Mass if they've received the communion worthily. Then it's that same peace that we are simply trying to be quiet and still for to become aware of when we're alone. And the beauty of it is that through baptism, see, we're made for this. God made us for this. In baptism, we become like what we say, a new creation and a temple of the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
So the same God, outside of which nothing exists, has chosen to come here. And I share the story, in the book that when I was trying to discern maybe living as a Carthusian, and they were walking me through their way of life, and I realized that they're not going to let me leave this cell except when we, go to the chapel together,
Mhm.
and for this one walk a week when we go together. Because I was like, when can I go to the chapel and pray? When am I going to go outside and go for walks? They're like, you can't. You stay in your cell. And the guy before he left, after walking me through the routine that I was going to go in, turns around and looks at me, and I'll never forget this. He says, "If you can't find God here, you're not going to find him anywhere."
Ooh.
And then he closes the door.
Ooh.
Now that doesn't come immediately because we have all these distractions and we are in kind of encountering him more of as an idea than a person. Now, I think that if we're honest, though, we do experience this at very unexpected times, even as little children. You know, that could be in a hard situation with your family or your friends or whatever, and you maybe were just laying in bed by yourself, and suddenly there was a peace, in your heart. Or maybe, you out watching a sunset or a sunrise, and all of a sudden there is this peace in your heart. And I love to take children to adoration just for a short time, so that they can, in that short time, just experience, oh, that's a peaceful place.
Mm.
So it's finally just connecting the truth that Christ is our peace. And the deepest sense that I am aware of his presence, it's not like, and I talk about this in the book too, it's not a piece of everything's okay. That's not the peace we're talking about, because you can still have conflicts going on and struggles going on.
I
It's
just
this,
described my brother's wife. Her name was Cindy, Father, and this was not an easy situation. And she
no.
found that peace that you're talking about. And she wasn't. She. This was not expected, Father. This was not expected. It's
Well,
exactly you're describing exactly that situation.
the peace, I mean, she finally opened herself to it, because it's always there, even in the most
Ooh, man.
difficult of
Yeah.
situations that I find myself in. When I find myself not at peace, I'm like, Lord, there's a beautiful prayer, make me an instrument of your peace. That
Yes.
where there's hatred, let me bring your love. Where there's injury, let me bring your pardon.
Mm.
So again, it's being aware that this peace is not, it's not an idea. So when at Mass, when we say the peace of the Lord be with you and with your spirit, this isn't an exchange of ideas. This is the person we have encountered as the reality that is our peace.
Oh, that's good stuff. Father, I could stay there for another half an hour, but we don't have a half hour. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna and thank you so much for that. And this is in the book, everyone. So we're not going to leave you hanging there. We're going to talk about loving God because this peace becomes almost an openness, a softening of that hardness of heart, Father, into a relationship of love. And what we find through just experience of life, even if you're happily married, say, there's something about your spouse that you say, well, man, this isn't exactly what I was looking for. I thought Mr. Wonderful you mentioned would just fill me up and I'd be filled up. Well, the Mr. Wonderful that you were alluding to is God Himself. So even it doesn't make your relationship bad. It means that there's got to be something more. It's only when I tie in what you're describing, Father, and I'm filled that I can give that to my wife. It's only when my wife is filled like that that she can receive my love and give it back to me. This is just this relationship. And so we see this all over, and no matter what vocation you're in. I see it in priests, Father, that, I work also with some priests, especially the young priests, and they're struggling too, because the culture that they grew up in, and things that are happening even in the church, and we're at the same situation, Father, that so many of the priests are the same as the lay people. We haven't sat in this and received this peace, and then came into this next part of your book, which is actually a love relationship with God, isn't it, Father?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot, oftentimes we kind of look at God as the giver of gifts, which he is, but sometimes that can blind us to encountering him as the gift. And that's way better, you know. Yeah, for spouses, too, that the best marriages are where you have two people who are very, I like to use the image of like ships, that a well-anchored ships, because sometimes people will say, well, my spouse is my anchor. I'm like, no, your spouse is not your anchor. Your spouse is a sinner who's going to get whipped around in storms. And you can hope that when they are, that you are a well-anchored ship that they're tied on to in the midst of their storms. And then the best, so a guy that worked with ship told me that we always anchor down, at night, but we never know if we're well anchored until a storm comes in.
Mm,
And then if we're
mm-hmm.
not well anchored, then we can tie on to another ship until we get our anchor set. he said, but the best scenario is where you have two, three well-anchored ships
Mm.
tied on to each other, then bring on the storm. But the
My
key,
yoke is easy and my burden light. I mean, this is the yoke, right? That we have to get yoked to Christ. And
yes,
anything else, Father, is going to go away. It just is.
yeah,
And and I think what you're describing is so powerful because it's really unfair to your spouse when they have to become the anchor and stay the anchor, because no person can bear that weight over time, can they?
no. No, there's a movie that I think you're probably familiar with, and I always use this in pre-marriage, that it's Jerry Maguire, and there's some
Yes,
really
yes, yes.
famous lines from that, like "You had me from hello" is the big one, right?
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
there's that very sappy line right before that where he comes back from this big event and realizes how lacking it was without her. And he says, "You complete me." And I'm like,
Mm,
that's the worst line you could have ever said because no human being can complete you. They're a
yes,
complete sinner. But it sounds nice. It sounds nice, but
yes.
we need to be completed by God, and then I can bring that to
Mm,
my spouse, which is
mhm.
beautiful to be that instrument to them.
I remember Saint Catherine of Siena in their dialogues, and God says to Saint Catherine, He says, "You can never really love me the way I love you, because I loved you first, and I already gave you this love, right? So I'm being loved, and really, when I'm loving God back, I'm returning what He's with the gift that He's already given, which is life itself, even, right?" And He said, "But I gave you your neighbor, and you can love them like I love you. I can go to my neighbor, I can go to my spouse, I can go to my friend, I can go to another person, and I can love them even when they don't love me back." See, this is a different thing. But in order to do that, and this is Mother Teresa too, right? Sisters, sit around. Yes, you have to spend time with God, because otherwise we cannot give what we don't have to all these
Mm.
poor people. We'll be like social workers, burnt out social workers over time, Father. So important. It's so beautiful, right? You couldn't make up the beauty of what we're talking about here, Father.
No, or nor the truth of it either.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, I mean, it's truth that we're speaking. And I think when you were mentioning some of the younger priests too, that they can never lose sight that their prayer life is the most important thing of their
mm,
ministry. In the book, I talk about Pope Benedict, who says the first task of a priest is to be a believer.
mm.
So we need to, the deeper our relationship is with God, the more we'll be able to be an instrument of that love to others. Um, and there's the old saying that if you lose sight of Christ, then there is no peace. That without Christ, there is no lasting peace.
Yes, and this is the problem with our technology, I think, today. It's not that the technology is so bad. Technology is technology. It can be good or bad, depending on how you use it. But it's a distraction too often for too many people, huh? And it keeps you on the surface. I thought about this boat you said bobbing around, with the spirit of the age getting blown around all over. And in order for that boat to go down, we do this exercise with young people, with teens, Father, where they're anxious, they're nervous. They even talk about suicide among their peers. And we ask them to sink down with us below. I'm a diver, a scuba diver. And I say, I'm on this boat and get ready to dive off right on in a reef. And it's wavy and it's bumpy. I got the fins on, I got the tanks on. You're trying to get to the edge of the boat. Sometimes it's difficult in the ocean bobbing around. But boom, you hit that water and you're down 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. And you go, ooh, wow. I look up and the surface is bobbing around, but here, ooh, it's calm. And the
Mm.
awe and wonder of everything you see around you, it's much different than on the surface. And this is, I think, what you're getting at, Father, in a different way, right? I mean, I'm using an analogy, of course, but I mean, to sink down below all this waves and all this noise. This is a temporal space. But what you're talking to is being anchored in infinite, right? In an infinite person. It's powerful.
Yeah. I think, it's what we saw so beautifully in the life of St. John Paul II, to be honest with
Mm,
you, that
mm,
I can't imagine, the turbulences that he faced every day, but he was so deeply anchored, you would have never guessed it. you know.
Yes,
But
yes, yes.
there is also the statement that he would periodically throughout the day, nobody could find him, because he would be in the chapel
Yes,
prostrate.
he would.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
and
So describe for
painting
people
himself.
that it might be some young people listening that say, this chapel that he comes into, right? And it usually it had the Eucharist is exposed, huh, in adoration, and he would lay there, wouldn't he? They said he would lay there sometimes, and they're trying to, he's got an appointment. We got to get him up, and you were afraid to touch him. He was in a different place, Father.
Mm.
Did you when you were in your daily life too, but when you were experiencing that as a hermit, I mean, that's got to be deep, Father. That's got to be deep. I mean, you have to get into these places where, I mean, it's got to. Can you give us like a little taste of an experience that you yourself have felt, Father, or some experience that you can relate to some of our young people? Not that they're going to look for this, right? I mean, this takes time, and I'm going to just throw this out there because, like you said, it doesn't just happen overnight. This is a relationship. I just met you. I can't know everything about you right now, but over time, and you had time, Father. What's that like, Father, when you get into this John Paul prostrate? I'm sure you've experienced very similar, if not the same things, Father, in your own way, right? God, we're unique, unrepeatable. God woos you different than he woos somebody else. This is the beauty of the sacred romance, but still, he wooed you, didn't he, Father?
Yeah, the beauty is, being now drawn back out of the hermitage. And
Mm,
I remember giving a retreat to our region's bishops, and we were talking about this type of prayer.
mm,
And they said, had you been a hermit, it would have been harder to hear you on this. But at the time, I was in a very large parish as the pastor there, and they knew what that life was like. And so this deep life with
mm.
Christ is not something that God is just dangling out there for the hermit. And it doesn't necessitate long periods of time. It's God, and I remember working with a directee, and we were friends, and we finished our time a little bit early, and they went on to talk about other matters. And I said, there's a little time left. Why don't you go to the chapel and pray for a little while? And they said, Father, by the time I get there, I'm just going to have like 10 minutes. I said, don't underestimate what God can do in 10 minutes. It is God. And to this day, they are like the witness to others of what God can do in 10 minutes in prayer.
Isn't that beautiful?
So
You
when they
you
feel
say
this,
it, Father. You say in the book that you were on retreat one time for like you had 3 days or something, but you came back after the first day because you missed the parish. Now you were filled, and now God sends you. Said, now go out and reach those people.
yeah, it was a little different than that
Okay.
because I wanted to stay. I had like 3 days scheduled off, and there was a lot of stuff happening at the parish. But we come to discover this peace that only He can give, right? In prayer. And it doesn't take long to know whether it's there or not.
Okay. Yeah.
And when I got out to the Hermitage, I had my first day was there, and it was beautiful. The Lord was just refreshing my soul in a way that I needed it for what He was asking me to do in the parish. But then He was like, okay, now there's a lot you need to get back to the parish. And I'm like, no, I got 3 days left. I'm sticking
Okay.
out
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a
Okay.
little less
That's right.
beautiful than you were just portrayed it to be. It wasn't like, oh, I'm filled and now I'm going to go back. I'm like, no, I'm staying here.
But
And
did he send
then
you
the
back?
Lord said, like, well, no, I got to go to the parish. So He went, and literally it was in a matter of hours that I'm like, how much grace God gave me to live 6 years as a hermit because I need to go back like now because that this isn't where He wants me right now. He wants me there. And
Right.
it's that awareness of His peace or that lack of peace. So that when we separate ourselves from the will of God, like from sin, that's when that peace is
Mm,
compromised.
mm,
That's when we don't have that peace within.
mm.
And so confession can really help us, to start to understand that rhythm of receiving God's peace in a real tangible way, and then compromising that peace by things that are not of his will. And then when we come to prayer, I can compromise that time by just seeking things from God.
Mm,
But when I'm there seeking him, something else can be
mm,
received, which is his peace.
mm. That's beautiful, Father. We're as we start to only got a few minutes left. I want to get into that last part, which is taking. You already are alluding to this when God calls you back into this parish, right? And says serving God. And I remember John Paul saying something so beautiful to young people. He always challenged young people. He wasn't afraid, was he, Father, to challenge young people. And he goes something like this, right? Young people, you know that your life has meaning to the extent that it's given away as a gift to others. And this is where we find this kind of where the rubber meets the road when you go out and you reach out to other people. It's the most talk about somehow being filled, Father, when I'm walking into the story and I'm going out to serve others. You this is almost like the finish of the cycle, right? You're setting yourself up in solitude. You're learning to love God. And then we have to love our neighbor. It's not brain surgery. It's the two great commandments, in essence, isn't it, Father? Okay, can we
Yeah.
kind of wind down? Talk to us just for a few minutes about when you were thinking about serving God, what that last part of the book meant to you, Father.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, John Paul II talking to our youth have an instinct of what is great
Mm.
and of what is when I taught high school, they had a real way of knowing if I was genuine or fake.
Yes, they
And they
do,
were
Father.
searching for something real,
Yep.
and that's what John Paul II would always challenge them because he knew that's what they were looking for. And he knew that nobody can sense a fake like a teen, or a young adolescent or a young youth. And they can sniff it out like that, I think, because there's so much fakeness around them, too.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of when we encounter God, it's like, and that's why he wasn't afraid of challenging them because you will not be disappointed.
Mm.
God will not let you down. He is the most authentic through and through person you're ever going to encounter. And then that's where the third part of the book comes in, that sometimes when we think of serving God, we think of the things that we're doing. And serving God really is about first knowing God and then loving God, because then we're going to just be where he wants to be.
Mm.
And that's where Jesus says that where
Mm.
I am, my servant will be,
Mm.
because we've been awakened that there is no better place to be.
Mm.
That only here is where I'm going to have peace. Only here is where I'm going to have fulfillment. Saint Teresa of Avila will say, outside of that house, there is neither peace nor security. That's a big other word for youth. And
Mm.
that's the truth that we encounter over and over again with anybody, even your spouse. You're not going to have 100% peace and security with them because they're sinners and they're going to hurt you. They'll come back and you'll work it through. But only in God do we have that peace and that security that we're longing for. And when you encounter that, there's no close seconds. I tell people, that when you encounter God for who He is, there will not be a close second in your life of love.
No, and it's so practical, Father. I was going to end, but I just want to tell you a quick story. So we were really struggling on our marriage many years ago, and this is a long time ago. And I had come back into the church on one of my brother's deathbed. Actually, I came back into the church, and we're struggling with this marriage. And I felt this peace coming back into the church, right? And then when I start to encounter my wife, we were, we want to see how little we can give one another, right? I mean, just
Mm,
I'll give you less, no, I'll give you less. And then I received this mercy, this grace, this I felt this love. And so I would walk in, and and I wouldn't get caught up in the anger, Father. And I start to see my wife as a little girl for some reason, and this love of God, just He loved her as a little girl. And I had asked her to marry me, and she had said yes. And now I was a man, just like another man, just arguing and demeaning her. And I go, no more. God just forgave me. He just, and now I have to do the same. And you can't do that without grace, Father. And so I took
No.
that grace and I would just receive it. And then slowly, 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 right? You just stop, stop being mean to people. Stop, arguing all the time. Start to see them as God sees them. And it's possible, Father, but you're right. You have to know God first. You have to love God first. You have to be filled with grace. And then he walks with you into the story. And I would pray before I would come home, and I'd say, God, give me the grace to see my wife the way you see her, right? To give me a little piece of that at least, right? And he did, Father. It's
Mm,
the most practical thing. What you're talking about here is practical life, practical
mm.
love, the way we're created to be, right? God is love, huh? Isn't it? Father, any last words as we go here? You're such it's such an honor to be with you. Your heart comes out right through this technology, which I said could be good, right? I want to remind everybody of the book again. This is Remain in Me and I in You, relating to God as a person, not as an idea. Father, what a gift you are. What a gift this book is. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Been a pleasure to be with you here with it. I just an encouragement that nobody gets it right all the time. Uh,
Mm,
Nobody's perfect in this path. That's why we're blessed to have a relationship with God because He is truly unconditional in His love for us. And as I identify in the book that when we encounter Him for who He is love and He is the Savior. So to encounter Him means that He's always going to come where I need to be loved and
mm.
where I need to be saved. And that's all you need to do. You just need to give Him your weakness. That's all God is looking for. And you can have a deep relationship with Him because then He can be Himself in you.
Oh, Father, give us a blessing on the way out. Will you please?
Sure.
We all need that. We really do.
Sure. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the bright living example of St. John Paul II, whose passing to you we celebrate today. We pray that we, like him, might be awakened to your presence within, longing to love us and longing to save us. We pray that we would delve deeply into this relationship that will never end and learn the beauty of true and authentic prayer. And I ask your blessing upon all those who are listening in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Just a reminder that demand for electricity and natural gas is growing tremendously across our nation. Is your business prepared for the resulting cost increase of 15% or more coming in the coming years? As a local family-owned energy broker and consultancy, AIM Utility Advisors has been helping small and medium businesses reduce energy costs for over 30 years. AIM will leverage these decades of experience with leading market analytics to provide a straightforward savings plan tailored to your business needs. AIM operates without a quota, so you can request a no-pressure cost analysis for free right through their website, which is aimenergygroup.com. That's AIM as in AIM, energygroup.com. I own small businesses most of my life, and I always used an energy broker to lock in rates, figure out the best rates I can get. So see the show notes for my friend TJ Lally's direct number and for more information in the show notes.